Yeah. All right, so we start with praise to Manjushri, page 12. I'm just going to share it on Zoom.
All creatures fall into the business of sorrow, confused in the darkness of the element overwhelmed by their suffering. You, restrained by the formation of the Dharma, arouse yourselves in the streets whose powers from the stupa out of visions and frees us from the iron chains of our whose powerful sword of wisdom gives us suffering wherever its parts appear. Clear away the darkness for all humans. I am Tsultrim, and whose body is adorned with 112 marks of the Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfection of Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, O Holy One of the beginnings of wisdom, illuminate that darkness and close my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them.
Sashi Purki Joshi Meto Dhammadri Ravishi Nidegenwadi Saye Shindu Meteoa Ilokonanda Srimachupashu Guru Rama Mandala Kandiyataya
Sanje
Chanan Soki Chanala Chancho Bali Dani Jasuji Dagi Chushiki Sonan Dola Penche Sanje Ruhasho
Sanje
Chanan Soki Chanala Chancho Bali Dani Jasuji Dagi Chushiki Sonan Dola Penche Sanje Ruhasho
Sanje
Chanan Soki Chanala Chancho Bali Dani Jasuji Dagi Chushiki Sonan Dola Penche Sanje Ruhasho
Kangi Torzeni Zonde, Tawa Tamji Pambi Chere, Tami Chun Tenze, Kondam Kela Changse. Good morning. Let's check on it.
콘서트 근데 뒤도 예산을
Let's check on the level Dumba. Zumju level Botsuria. Registra.
So we start today with the 7th chapter from Shantidevas Guide to Bodhisattva of Life, and the chapter teaches joy, self-thought, enthusiasm.
These the Chidang Tundru Singi, Gava Chivalaya, Trovi, Sambachilaya, Tundru Singoris.
So Joseph is being enthused in virtuous activities.
These the Gava Chivalaya, Tundru Thi, Yungalaya, Chidang Tamboti, Gedi Pama, Monch Trabana, and give it paying down, degree Yemiki, rich, Uyanis of Landerki, Nate Chief, Monch Trabana, and Gavachevaya, true somebody, a Yonagi. So the Ling Namju, Sheravaya, took the Yuchik. Chidan Chagados, Rock.
So what do we need to do in order to develop enthusiasm? Well, first off, we need to understand what are virtues and non-virtues. To be able to recognize what are virtuous activities and what are non-virtuous activities. We also need to understand what are the things that we need to take up and what do we need to cast aside. And from understanding what is virtue, what is non-virtue, what are the things that we need to do, what are the things that we ought not to do, which means that we develop wisdom that can well discern between what is positive and negative, what is to be done, what is not to be done. Through that, we develop enthusiasm in virtue.
Dire dinza, that dinam Gevalaya, Chadam, Gevaram Jing, Tamusum, Gevachung Jing, Chemos Lavan, Chomo Gisra, in the Yungurosta, when I gave an age, Chunjum, Pena, Sid Digi, that Digi Moya Tian, Chadam Gevachelaya, giving Vejala, Sonum Vejala, Yunguras, and Gevachima. Wonder how the meal comfortable good, and it's giving pacha, and it didn't let any jungle was. The Thar Lame Zoshan, since the Tamji Cheto, Lame Zoshan comfortable, and it giving simply, giving pacha should change shower any younger as it, Pesiuredas, Renza, the Zongju gave all the trossy, giving more deep. 직시하고 좀 당주 사회의 규칙으로 지단요레스로.
So then in terms of the virtuous actions that we cultivate, there are different extents to virtues. There is a great virtue, a medium, and a small virtue. So one way of looking at that would be to, for example, look at virtuous actions that lead to happiness and well-being in this life. Thank you. So virtues that lead to happiness and well-being in this life. So we can call them virtues or meritorious actions. Or there's the medium one, the middling one, which is virtue that will lead us to the state of liberation that extends beyond this life, right? So future lifetimes and beyond the state of liberation, placing imprints upon the mind stream for that to occur. Then the roots of virtue that will result in the state of complete and perfect, unsurpassed enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So in that sense, there are different extents to virtues. There are great virtues, middling virtues, small virtues. So then when we start to think of what would be those virtues, Geshe says that it becomes actually quite an extensive explanation. In that sense, it's hard to encompass all the virtuous activities that are included within that. It is limitless. It is infinite. It is an infinite presentation. So, we have here a couple of people that are offering chai to the students. So thank you very much. Yeah, we'll soon. La. That's all.
Dinza, Tangan Sunjugi, Songju Yuldi Hakuko das. Songju Yunga, Songju Yuldi. Tian Yul, that's Ramjin Tassel and Rap Chop Kyorti, Karimba. But Tindiji Hakovana and Songju Chevalia, Gava Chevalia, Troy Sambala, Juyalaya, and Troy Dion Salis.
The point here is that when we understand what the object is of joyous effort, and the object is virtue, right? Rejoicing in virtue, and in such, there are great virtues, medium virtues, small virtues. When we understand that, we understand what constitutes virtue, then we can truly rejoice. We can truly become enthused or be happy about virtue.
Timato tan yon zuchi migivi le te yorwas timji le ya phi le ya khadru duri ji yoba ne ya de ya duri ser modo zonju mindi jugumudus onzu kalle gyalse bodi chi zonju sambarach samba ne diremudus kanji zonju yele ya gyawagodus ro gevi ki chawach.
Now the word for joyous effort in Tibetan is tsundru. Now, this word is also used in a colloquial sense to mean that you become diligent in something. But just being diligent in a particular thing does not mean to say that it's necessarily joyous effort. Because you can be diligent, for example, in doing something that is non-virtuous, something that is negative. You can be really diligent in doing that. But that does not constitute joyous effort. To have joyous effort from a Buddhist perspective, a religious perspective, would be to rejoice in something that is virtue, to delight in something that is virtuous.
Song Codinia, so deep, and Teva Chimbugi on the Chibigi, and Song Juti, Sartango Edita, Nangas Chagores, so deep.
So that's virtue in general. Now, particularly here, as we're looking at the presentation of the six perfections. Joyous effort is part of the six perfections, which means that there is a specific or tailored explanation that we get of joyous effort here that accords with the Mahayana presentation.
Ani kiya ani so chabo ani ro ani trovi sembadi ani kamdi ni shebi ta chikzonju kichishu di shana jigyo de samudus ro.
And since we're here looking at joyous effort from the viewpoint of the Mahayana presentation, then from a Mahayana point of view, we develop compassion. We develop bodhicitta. And there's joyous effort in compassion and bodhicitta. This is to say that there is enthusiasm in the development of compassion and bodhicitta. So in order to understand what it means, we need to look at the mode of apprehension of joyous effort. The mode of apprehension of joyous effort in focusing on compassion or bodhicitta would be to find those states to be delightful. Right, so delighting in compassion, delighting in bodhicitta.
Until the penal so any hinji nyamel jubi, true somebody, and kabdi zunju, and chanju sem rangulaya, and choyalaya, true somebody, and kabdi zunju, laya interiores, and some jet tamji each other. Lame Zoshan Komba, ya, and Juba Trugi, and somebody the Yimbaras, but indeed, Shabba, Zunju said, you conduct ya, 아니 주요 메티 테스트 세브 드링도스 이무다스라
Which means that in this context, as we're looking at Shantidevas to Bodhisattva of life, in this context, joyous effort is explained to be, for example, joyous effort in compassion, which means becoming enthused about compassion, becoming enthused about bodhicitta, finding them delightful, delighting in that, delighting in the state of complete, unsurpassed, perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That is joyous effort in this context.
잠주 주고 지단하면 가게진 지단하면 서자디 ndo koraninji ushirtus.
So we have tea offering being made today. What is your names? What are your names actually? Shannon? Darshana. All right. So we have two kind people that came today to do some chai offering. So thank you very much. People at home, you can rejoice in the virtue of those two people. So let's do the tea offering. Cheers. Dhanyavad Didi.
먼저 남기 삼민말 박박 내지나
No.
내지나 그 사람하고 차지 안 소저 필요해서 아직 뭐 개발직도 안 걔는 배신 입어도 자
No.
먼저 진단 입어도 괜히 차게 차진다
배신 대신 치고 말하디 지난주에 미만데 신대핀 이제 잘 누구로 대신 얼마나
네 그냥 고마스
네 데미망이
어디 남기 니마이는다 어딘디어스라 간지 안 소저 필요 상물로야 투지치스
So we have people that sponsor tea offerings for our study program. So we have normally chai on Wednesday morning, and today we have a special event. We have two kind of people that offer chai today. So Geshe is rejoicing in the virtue of all of those people that have been offering chai to the study program. Thank you very much.
안칸이 야갈에 유름부 슈연자 아니 야갈기 비리 네 코란기 엔 칠랍지가 남자들의 연주 레오이스 야가 펜루초 좀 된데네 집에다 펜루 넘버다 슈시네 비리 기체슈 야파부이 차요라스 데레야로몬 괜히 슈자 디기 인간지 칠랍
So both of you have stayed in India for many years, right? For a long time. So, India is the land of the great masters, the great pandits. It is not only the Arya land of the great pandits, of course, this is also the birthplace of the Buddha, the Bhagavan. So through that, we receive the blessings of the teachings. So you guys have been in India for many years, and you could say that through that and through others we receive the blessings of the Arya land, the land of the great beings.
chagores ne tida nyamdo dan chosu jawase den chibi chendab jugiya ya ani ichi debati peki chimboresas ichi debar yono sangi chendab di kani inna ani sosu samna ya jugiya yungu yasare siro.
So we develop trust, and trust is important. From Buddhist perspective, we develop reasons in analyzing the way, or we use reasons in analyzing the way that things exist at the very basis. And we have different modes of analysis, just like analyzing a nugget of gold in melting it, rubbing it, cutting it in half. So we can also use reasons, 3 modes of analysis, in order to investigate the nature of phenomena that exist at the very basis. But that's not the only way to approach that. Together with that, we also have trusting faith in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of 10 directions, and through that we receive the blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas.
Asdani dirda tinji da chonju di ra gewi chawala ya trowing samba ani chonju shabala ya ani chonju le thapsule nis lewi shong shaba ta lewi sen ta chonju kor phi ta sewu song shaba di ani gas chim shawali ta chonju lewi dumbat chaganza ani jasuru chi ta lewi dumbi di ani Geshe
And as we're following a commentary by Gyeta Dhammadinchen to Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, at the beginning of Gyeta Dhammadinchen presentation, he says that his explanation will come under 2 headings. There is the explanation of the subject matter of this text, of this chapter, Joris Effort, and then at the end he will relate to the title of this chapter. So first thing first, we're going to begin with an explanation of Joris Effort in the 7th chapter from Shantideva's text. Let's look at the structure of this chapter. So chapter 7 teaches Joris Effort. It begins with explaining the chapter's material, and there are 2 main points in that explanation. First off, imploring one in the need to undertake Joris Effort, and then how to undertake Joris Effort.
Inza sajedi sonju som goba kurwa sebi ke kichimure ndasra chetan ngamse ta chi su longbe rishong da chi en program to ta ani thaden de ngamse ta chi ni chi zona wala ya chi su rawan sebi kichimu shu zigoras niya angamse chi su rawan rang ton su deba khang yo rang ton ani dro deba ina chik chidi rawan re ani yabu shur was ina chik chidi gi ta su deba di ngi kombi ongi droya di pelela uchado was inza kon kyo thoma me bani thanda bardo nozole komshi mang chela ya komshi di the chadam mosong ngargir chado rensam tomin royati chikchile rensam tomin royati ko ani kombashu chembo di lab go meba kombashu chembo jenza di shaman shorba na ani metse di tinji tawchi ko kigi ta simje jensen tawo so chaba na ani mi kewale godin di duguyo malis tinza landur ni shingin jida pigi o dindri chiki kurma chin ji yoba no di suzul ya pe tar tung di kyabsan chimbu togu yores ro.
So this chapter begins with imploring one in the need to undertake joyous effort. So there's a certain exhortation that Shantideva is making at the beginning of the chapter, calling upon us to develop joyous effort. So in general, first of all, when we look at this exhortation that is made at the beginning of the chapter, you could say that it is a way of approaching a certain topic from a Buddhist perspective. This is the custom of doing that, giving someone an inspiration to develop joyous effort. But then when we look at the way that things function in our society, in our community, we're used to doing things that we want to do. We have the freedom to do what we wish to do. And it's important to make sure that we do maintain a freedom to act in a certain way. But often when we wish to do something, when we want to do something, we want to do that because we are familiar with that. We have habits that we've acquired before. And when we acquire habits in doing something, then we develop also a greater wish to undertake those things. So for example, when we look at habits that we have developed in this life, we are so used to afflictive states of mind. We have habits, so we're used to anger and attachment and pride and jealousy, sense of competitiveness and so forth. And those habits make it so easy for those states of mind to arise. So if we do submit to those habits and we do not do anything about it, and we live a life through being influenced by those habits, there would be no great purpose in this life in which we have obtained freedoms and opportunities which have great potential. If we do not pay attention to what needs to be taken up and what needs to be cast aside, and we just follow our afflictive states of mind, there would be not a lot of purpose of meaning to a precious human rebirth. So then, in order to make sure that that does not happen, first of all, Shantideva begins this chapter by saying that find some inspiration in virtue. He's imploring us, he's making an exhortation to make sure that we delight in virtue.
Pena Bechunjun Shavanas, Bechunjun Shavan, Penta, Penangados, Peshavanas, Nga Gesa the Peg, Piggy, that person that Yami content with Sanson Chedes, Lomba Chagores, Telea, Har and Chick, one time you launch that something you give a Tardes of Delia, Park of Jelea, Combatonra not to play. And torsion chichi, Kanchi Gombachi meva, and P chi number ya, and the Tazong number chi and Toya meva, or Dindri chachin that, and then low peshe, Navchunagoli, the Trujirego, Lochutans jelaya, and Tanga Kiyoros, Lombakujo, the Kini, and Nig so Pamade, Tinang with a moment TV. Cutting moment in Nalaya, Kulmachichin, cutting Tawachi Gores. Piglia Dosa Gomba Yomare, Robert Chawa the Sumat indicate any Tachikanding Yomar in Nalaya, cutting Kulmachichin, can a Tawachi Gores Lanza, and Alochosum Chushini, Kanji, and Tawachiagi, Kogoti Chorias. Kazing Ala Kulmachin never know, and long big me mancha, Piglia, and Tawada Suman Yomare, Tosu Drodi Zambala, not Dinyam, Hadrechidai, the Imbaros Ra.
So Geshe has just a small anecdote to illustrate the purpose in imploring someone to take up a particular thing. So Geshe said that, for example, he himself was born in Tibet. So he was born in Tibet, in a country that was, in an area that was quite poor. Geshe was born at a time in which Tibet was already under Chinese occupation. When the Chinese took over Tibet, there was a long period around the time of the Cultural Revolution, where the Buddha Dharma that was so widespread in Tibet, all over, was under strict oppression. So there were more than 6,000 monasteries in Tibet prior to the Chinese occupation, and they were completely razed down to the ground, completely destroyed. For more than a decade, monks and nuns, well, people were not allowed to be monks and nuns, so you couldn't see monks and nuns in Tibet. So Geshe was born into this era where there weren't monasteries around. It was prohibited to be monks and nuns. You couldn't see monks and nuns around. He was born into a family of nomads, and his grandmother lived in the family's encampment. So from very young age, she implored Geshe to become a monk. I told him that if he became a monk, that would be, first of all, very good for him. His life will turn very good, but also he will be able to offer service to the monastic institution, to monks and nuns and so forth. So you could say that from day one, up until the age of 13, 14 years old, this is what Geshe had in his ear, someone imploring him to become a monk. And Geshe says that indeed, when he was 13, 14, he did become a monk. And he thinks that without his grandma being in his ear, telling him that every so often, he would not have become a monk out of his kind of own accord. So there was someone that repeatedly put that message in his mind. And of course, it's not the only one. You could say that there are also other people of a similar background that were implored at some point when he was allowed again to become monastics, that this is what they need to be doing, without which Geshe reckons that we would not be seeing any more monks and nuns in Tibetan society.
Tini danga tawa chinia pida kapkalaya pen yarnet sosados ani gunga dinji gita tuzutundon dondani sum dinji ne sos soyach korna ya sowaris korpoche and gomba mares and dinjila nga sarkashi chikuya kogop chons na jagal male korwa ine di thangma tuzza thangma di na simjin so roya non big drop and na simjin so royes ra simjin so rodi anaya chi en so nga pa lagi yila gres ra ani ngi yit kitchen big perenality jabla ken nga ri kan simjin so ro an big simjin sa sa lu de di yigi jang ko din chi war din mamu chi ngi ra adu che ani nima chi ya tangi jojo gembati jagala ya mi chi tim drenza jojo jagala ta sergoma le yor sati ni sem ha ko wars tiji nga simjen so rigan la roche ni je tongu gan ta chi sa tan pa tan ni pala la de ra nima kha ni kondan rogi na ti chola jaga yores tiji ngi di chola ba ten ni nga sergoma la le sho osin ni manam de jaga yes lo chama chi dukala ya manam de ja ani nga lama chi thusin lama di kana jaga rogi na ko ro chegos nga dus tans kanji nga mi mamu shuji ki kurma chebal teni ani nga saji khugyo teni theni jaga lombala ya jaga pabu le ani pechata ko ya ani geging kazus kurma cheres ro kazus labja geveres nimachi ki tuzo na chi chola mondos kurma chebal teni an thamanga gish tabjas ten yoros ro ani ta den delde ya dia an kon nambigi kurma chebal teni ngi charan so ya marang jang jaba di ngoto che chone dia an mi kurma chebal teni leba di jaji ja tam pare sro.
So the word for imploring someone in Tibetan also has that connotation of asking them to do something, but also inspiring them to do something, right? So it's a combination of those two notions. So Geshe says that, as he said, he got that inspiration or someone imploring him to become a monk from very young age. So he was born, as we said, in into a nomadic background. So at the time in which he became a monk, the Buddha Dharma was still in a restoration from the very foundation situation in Tibet, in that all the monasteries and nunneries were destroyed, monks and nuns were not to be seen. So when he became a monk, there weren't institutions, monasteries that one could join. So he became a monk and he still stayed in his family's tent. But then there were some events during the year in which monks and nuns started to come together again. Like one of them was the summer retreat. So you would leave your family's encampment and come together with some monks and nuns and do the rituals of a summer retreat. Or also during the winters, there are a couple of activities. So maybe you would leave the family's tent for a couple of weeks and join together with some monks and nuns. And those activities also were done in a tent because the monasteries and nunneries were not restored at the time, right? It was very early days after the Cultural Revolution. But anyway, during that time, Geshe as he was still in his family's encampment, he used to go out with the animals to the big pastures, right? So that was part of his role as an adolescent in his family's tent. So he used to go out with the animals, and his father was the one that taught him how to read. So he used to pack some text with him, go out with the animals, sit at the top of the mountains and watch the animals as they were grazing, and he practiced reading. Now, his father told him that when you look at the direction of the sunset, this is where India is. So, Geshe would sit on top of a big mountain and look at the horizon to the sunset and kind of thinking, may I get there one day? In that, his elder brother, was also became a monk, and Geshe heard that he managed to make his way to India and joined Sera Monastery, which was a big monastery, Tibetan monastery in India. And Geshe was sitting on top of that mountain and kind of making those aspirations. May I get there also one day? One day he met a Lama, and this Lama told him that if he also would like to go to India to join Sera Monastery, would help him. So he made his way to India successfully. He joined Sera Monastery, and during the years of being in Sera Monastery, when he was undergoing his Geshe studies, also he got a lot of inspiration and imploring from his teachers to study well, to go deeper in the text. So he was able to stick with the study program all the way to its completion to become a Geshe, and that is also due to the inspiration or imploring request of his teachers. Having finished his studies, he was requested to come here to take up the position of the Geshe at the center, to share his knowledge, whatever he studied before with us. So all the process was, you could say, inspired by quite a few people that he met along the way that made those requests, that made those exhortations, that gave him some inspiration to stick with what he was doing and go further and further along. So all of that, you could say, is because of those requests. If none of them had been done, he would not have been able to do that.
Authentic residents and Kulmachi said, pay kitchen book, singing jiki, Lengi, Namja, singing jiki, and machine engineer, Kulmachi Goyadi, and singing digging, gain shadows, one is gain shadows. Tea none on the touch, Tavachin, chicken singing, Chanju singing, touch, and Dombaso, Soba, Kanji Chanju singing, any Jabalaya, loving sing, killing things in Muni, any machine engineer, any Suzukan Shibadi, Lagoyati, the Suzuki game, Suzuki Tamsik, rock, some chagados, rock.
So then in terms of joyous effort, when someone is asking us to do something, imploring us or inspiring us to do something, you can say that this is also our responsibility to do that, particularly here when we think about it from the viewpoint of the Bodhisattva conduct. So we have developed bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. We have taken the Bodhisattva vow. we're training in bodhicitta. Without knowing what are the things that we ought to be doing, of course, how we'll be able to do that. So we need someone to teach us how to do it. So there's a responsibility, you could say, to learn what needs to be done, to be taught what needs to be done. And there's also a responsibility then to take this knowledge and put it into practice.
and dichagdos dimado nganzo sozulya rawan gogu yordenia ani nyumu tuksomgi rawan yong zogo chochini ani nganso munta mebalya kieshengi ani nyumu tuksom redos pra tinza nyumu tuksom le chu thayalya rawan raya gi tapchu di ani lamdur ni shiyanti tinza and delay kurma chikoya di kurma chedi any me phasho me round chogu yomare round gi round le ya khaswata ji round yonya gi chet roba che da masno dichag das ra.
So then we need to be introduced to what we need to take up and what needs to be cast aside. We need to develop knowledge of that and to put it into practice. And that, all of that, to be taught how to do it, to understand what needs to be done, to put it into practice is done because we have freedom to do that. So we have freedom to do that, but then we also need to exercise that freedom. We have freedom, we enjoy freedoms and liberties in human societies, but currently when we look at our freedom and liberties, they're influenced by our afflictive states of mind. Anger and attachment and ignorance, those poisonous afflictive states of mind, are those states of mind that we are so used to that give us suffering again and again in miserable states of existence and otherwise in other states as well. So you could say that we do have freedoms, and yet our freedom is being influenced by anger, attachment, and so forth. So to make the most out of our freedom is to learn what is to be taken up and what needs to be cast aside, and then to put it into practice. That would be the best way to gain freedom. So first of all, we have an exhortation to make the most out of it, to take up what needs to be done, to cast aside what we ought not to do, because that is the best way to gain freedom.
Rebenanganzo semdi kungri wi shawan kyobayna kungri wang shobayna ani zawa nim magibachi kibu zawa nim neba chagbas control le tarchini round tobayna kadduina semliya an bhagpebujda shidichi yungyoba besigur wasla anzu control sabe kadle kadsusi ani magibachi yungundo control shukchembo sound and tana zuboina sample tuya mase zuboina darsigya de tindi yungyoras dinza the dil suji tarbaina and kazus gbelegers ra di any taya tapdi lengi number jibi namjuk toni yongo duma de semba and the kabu shujres ra dia lengi number jibi namje yonya ya and zomjugo das ra zomjugo das.
So for example, when we look at how we are controlled by anger, when a mind comes out of the control of anger, we can see how unhappy we become. We're made completely miserable under the influence of anger. So then, having experienced that state of being under the control of anger, we can ask ourselves how then it would be like to be free, completely free from anger. How much more relaxed a mind would be without anger. There would be quiescence and peacefulness without anger. not only when anger arises, the mind is made so unhappy. Also, when we look at the physical manifestation of anger, we can see how it also creates that discomfort on the physical level. Like, for example, when anger arises in the mind, it influences the body. We sometimes start to shake, to quiver when we become livid. So think about it, how much more relaxing it would be to be completely without anger. So to become free of anger, or freedom from anger, will occur if we develop wisdom that can distinguish between what is correct, what is incorrect, what is positive, and what is negative. And in order to develop that wisdom, we need joyous effort. Without wisdom, without joyous effort in the development of wisdom, that will not come to pass.
Somebody's Gavalaya, Gavala, Jubala, Tribute, somebody, Kurma Chevalaya, that Murtang, Sunju Mursons, Sunju Tamuni, that there's service on the some. The other Chanjuni, long you are never seen some Sunju Jones.
In order to become enthused about virtue, first off, Shantideva says that we need to recognize what virtue is. And this is how we begin chapter number 7. So first off, again, when we look at the outline, when Shantideva implores one in the need to undertake joyous perseverance, joyous effort, he gives the actual explanation in the first verse and identifying joyous effort in the second verse. Let's look at the first verse. Just a second. It says, with patience I should undertake joyous effort. Enlightenment will dwell in those who strive. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without joyous effort.
Level to be called that Bena do not count in Lambatan, and it's usually chimney Soba, and it Sobaya Puch Yavana, Sobinyamni, and it should symbol Yavana, and D. Litogi, and it gave a tribute somebody, and it soon be Yunguris. Soon do Yavana, and it Teletani, and it Bena, Tardu Gichanju Combantia, and it Teletani Yunguris. Negavgi. 아니 응원도 하다미 공방 아니 지 간지 생 디지 순진이 아니 zon들에 되는 연구です.
This verse begins with saying, with patience I should undertake joyous effort. So we've covered the topic of patience in chapter number 6. We spoke of different types of patience. Patience that pays no heed to harm done to you, or patience that is willing to accept suffering. So you cultivate patience, and it says, with patience I should undertake joyous effort. So if we have strong patience, if patience become stable and strong, we can undertake joyous effort in rejoicing, for example, delighting in the virtues that lead to the state of liberation or to the state of enlightenment. Or at the very least, those virtues that lead to a high status rebirth as a human being or other high status in our next rebirth.
The lonely you are never said, Penas to the lower Pena Ganzunta Marmage Parchani, Mame Pasa de la long you are Mevana, and Marme Korana, Niva Kang of a Sewudi, and a Sewu Tony, near to it, Yungras. Dinancing Pena Penanganzu Shindonganayata, Medoshu, Sharondi, and longi Shukchimbu Yavana, Method Lamsan Todrech. Method Todrech, method you near to Mugas. Long Mevaina, and your Mevaina, and method the Korangi, Sekazus and Pizu Border, and religion near to get. yung nanshingi zongju yobai na ani sonum dang ani chanju la soba dinanshingi ani zongju la teni negres zongju mena ani sonum da kusu yung tu mares ro az pila tene kali ge tro samba mena kali ge mari kali ma ge gi yung mari gi mena je ju mares.
So with patience I should undertake joyous effort, enlightenment will dwell in those who strive. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without joyous effort. So it speaks here about just as there is no movement without wind. So sometimes when we consider this, those analogies that are given the analogies that are given in relation to wind, it is said that, for example, if you have a candle or a battle lamp that are susceptible to winds, when the flame is stirred up, they do not become very strong. They do not put out strong illumination. Or if you think about a tree in full bloom, covered with flowers, if there is a very strong gale that passes through, the flowers could be scattered all around. Whereas if we free from those strong gales, from strong winds, the flowers on the tree could have a longer longevity. But anyway, here, when we speak of just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without joyous effort, the wind here is referring to the wind of joyous effort. So our activities do need to be supported by this wind of joyous effort, particularly when we think of the activities of the development of compassion and bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. Without strong delighting in those activities, we'll not be able to reach a high level of compassion and high level of bodhicitta. Without joyous effort, we will not be cultivating virtues. So it needs to be moved, to be carried away by the winds of joyous effort. Without creating the causes, results will not come to pass, will not arise. Without having joyous effort in the creation of the causes, virtuous causes, will not be able to experience the results of those causes.
Sonum da yishi soja zongju menom John Mingiwi Lanami Chanjun Zongula Ralevi Beber Chawas.
Getadama Rinchen says with respect to verse 7, if one wishes to attain enlightenment quickly by being patient with austerities and harm by others, as explained before, then one needs to commence the practice of enthusiasm. Enlightenment abides in those striving in this way in the actions of the perfections. Just as without wind there is no movement of the candle flame and so forth, the accumulations of merit and transcendental wisdom will not arise without enthusiasm. Since the highest enlightenment depends on enthusiasm, one should make an effort. Sorry?
You said 7, verse 7.
Yeah. First verse, chapter number 7, yeah. So thank you. So from the introduction to the middle way, it says, all qualities follow enthusiasm or joyous effort because of both accumulations of merit and wisdom.
Oman Jubales, Oman Jubale, and then daughter, Yonde Malu Zongju generation, Sonum Lodge Sonum, in Sheson Batars.
These two lines are taken from Chandrakirti's supplement to the middle way. All qualities follow enthusiasm because of both accumulations of merit and wisdom.
Niba Zongju Muswani, Zong Kang Gela Joe was the Tanjisha de
Now let's look at an identification of Geshe, which is the second point in this section. So verse 2 begins with, what is enthusiasm? It is enthusiasm about virtue.
Then the driven on your Nashireta, Penan Yumungi Cholaya, draw Yungachi, Yungores, that the draw Kanga to Chagmars, Penan Yumungi Cholaya, draw Yoadi, and Lelo Remado, Zundri Maris, Lelo Ibis, Zundri Kanshina, gave me while draws.
So the word in Tibetan for Geshe is Tsundru, and in English we either say Geshe or Joy's perseverance or enthusiasm. There are different ways of translating this word into English. Here in the commentary it says, what is enthusiasm? It is joy in virtue. But it makes this point that since joy for the afflictions is laziness, what then is enthusiasm? It is a joy for virtue, for a virtuous object. So what Geshe Rinpoche highlights here is that you might be diligent in a particular thing. You might be enthused about something that is non-virtuous. If you're enthused about something that is non-virtuous, it is not Joy's effort, because Joy's effort has to be enthusiasm with respect to virtue.
That did Danji Kanji, and Gavi Chushi Dribi Chedo, and Bedrin Chibigi, and Trovigis, Samson Segorada, Samson D, and yeah, individually at Tunji Segres.
Which means that altogether, just Joy's effort or enthusiasm is a mental factor that delights in virtue.
That the Samson thing or some way. That Telayenas, Kochi Tunjutan, Kochi Tunjusami, Peg Tony Shegoras, Jorvi Tunju, Mashimshi, Munjubi Tunjutan, Chok Mishibi Tunjuti shows.
So after we had a brief identification of Joy's effort, here Geshe Rinpoche lists down different types of Joy's effort. So when Joy's effort is divided, or enthusiasm is divided, there is an armor-like enthusiasm, enthusiasm of application, enthusiasm of non-disheartedness and non-disturbance, and enthusiasm of non-satisfaction.
So the suggestion the only much some younger than Pena Kochi Zonjus Laundi, Kocha singing the Yobina, Pena Mounts in San Andrew, Kocha Yobina, and it soon comes like Lebaina, Kocha the Katsini, and the rank loose song to a chick. Yungros, Dinan Shingi, Zonju Yobina, Samlaya, Zonju Yobina, and it's Newman Sanjalas over Kamich, Lebaina, and it's Zonju the Katsini. And rangi sem and gewala netwich diungores.
Armor-like enthusiasm and so forth will be explained later on, but just to give you some introduction to those types of enthusiasm. And armor-like enthusiasm works like a real armor that you wear, that you don when you go into the battlefield in order to protect yourself from being injured by bullets or arrows of the enemy. Similarly, when you practice Joy's effort in which you delight in virtue, you want to be protected from the weapons of the afflictions. And this is the armor that you wear. You wear the armor of Joy's effort so that your afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and so forth will not be able to dim the power of your enthusiasm.
That Java said that Yamning ne penachik and Manzuta and Kyosungi Lam Yamsulia. The Yunguras, how do Kyo Chimbu with that chick? And Ninji the Chanju Samlia, and Lojong Yabuji, and Java Tsumdrit Mena, Mena Nanzuta Jinkan Tumaros, and the Tsumdriti, and Lamlia Jongingi, and Kaso, that's Kuma the Masuna Yashudi Zundris.
The second type of Joy's effort is Joy's effort of application or in our trainings. So not only we train our mind in the steps of the path of the 3 scopes, but we take up in a more specific sense the practices of compassion and bodhicitta. And in order to develop them well, we need longevity in practice. We need to carry that for a long time. In order to be able to maintain those trainings for a long time, we need joyous effort.
Then the same the Cochada Monso Shuchum, Jigiton Yenta, Dilit Taria, and Betsun Kale Mambu Shuch Majamna, Yonya Yomaras, that deep Betsun Kale Javelia, Kaukalaya, Sam Shimchin, Tanging on Samari Samson Roach, and Samia Shumbakichi, and Sam Trudra Soba, Indian words that Dinji Manoyagi, and it Tabzodi, and it Zunju somebody Shuchimbu Giovanna, and it Shumba Meba. Shumba meba drotuyach, and the same mantruba netuyati, and zone driven bezon teni yungres.
The third type of joyous effort is joyous effort in which your mind does not become a faint-hearted mind. It doesn't become disturbed. So thinking of the difficulties or the hard work that we need to put into training over a long time in compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. Our afflictions do arise in that process, and they do give us some problems. And sometimes it's easy to become disheartened when a certain situation arises. So your mind becomes disturbed when something happens. So the third type of joyous efforts here is explained to be that which does not allow your mind to become disheartened when something occurs. It does not allow your mind to become disturbed when a certain situation arises.
Shivadi Kakal North Sisaras, Chok Mishibi Zonju said, Goris Landi, Namjing Azu, Chokilaya, Choshi Gores, Choshi Gores at Yoros, Choshi Gwasajada, Choshi Mugosajigi, and Chomi Yobadi, Dishingo does rock.
Now, the fourth type of joyous effort is insatiable. This is how you say it, insatiable joyous effort. You cannot be, this is how you say it, right? Insatiable.
Insatiable, yeah.
So then the word for insatiable in Tibetan also means that you're not satisfied. So we need to make a distinction between insatiable joyous effort and just the meaning of being dissatisfied, because when distinguishing between satisfaction and dissatisfaction, you could say that there is a negative side to dissatisfaction. But here we're not looking at joyous effort that is a negative joyous effort in which you remain dissatisfied. Rather than that, here it is insatiable joyous effort.
Till the Nanzu Pena Chokshi Chegosadi, on the same big Chavalaya, Pena, and same big Chavalaya, and Chokshi Chena, Kevsan Chayores, as Chok Mashivaina, and Kabdina Koilaya, and Tamegi Yajin Droyo Maris, not the Chokshi Machin, Katus in Piglia, and the Lujon of Jimaina, Lujon of Chevana, Katus, Lujon Chevania, Ludi, and Tar Mag Kom Droyaj Matobi, and Yar Yam Droyaj Nevadi, Sivuros, in the Collier, and Choshi Chiguach.
So then when we explain the difference between being not having satisfaction or being insatiable, we can generally say that the things that we enjoy in this lifetime only. And it's good to be satisfied with the things that belong to this lifetime only because they're limited. So it is beneficial. You get a profit by developing a sense of satisfaction with things that belong to this lifetime only. Like, for example, when you think of, for example, things that you enjoy on a physical level. Like, for example, you may take up some training, some physical exercises, which are limited in their scope of development. Also considering the progression of our life, the body does deteriorate. It's not that the body is improving more and more as the older we get. The body is declining. So Therefore, things that belong to this lifetime only are limited, and it's good to develop a certain level of satisfaction with those things. That will give you a benefit.
Dele da dinashing ben kala dojin kala shimuch rawan dele ya choshi machina so meba sevaino ani kangareos nyokra rosta.
Or similarly, you can say that with food, it's also good to develop a sense of satisfaction with food, in that if you always desire most excellent food and more, of course, it will give you some problems.
That same yagi droyak ro kanji gewi gichu sengi kazus drubaina ani tameba yagi droyach yoch chagores benangan kazus sound tambaina kazus sound tam di chugi ani ser droyach ro chagoza di cholaya ani chokshi jin devani kyongres inza chok mishi zongju kanji gewi cholaya ani chok kadüne kana chokshi jining mars I kansın yagi droyers dedi ro tameba yagi droyers.
But then with mental development, we don't want to be satisfied with mental development, in a sense that a mind can be developed limitlessly, infinitely. Like, for example, you take up a particular topic and you start to think about it, and the more you think about this topic, the greater the clarity that is developed with respect to it. So if you become satisfied in an early stage with respect to how much you have contemplated that topic, you will not enhance the clarity that you have in your mind. Whereas if you become insatiable, right, not dissatisfied, but insatiable, you have a greater scope of developing better and better qualities. And a mind can be developed limitlessly. And this is what the fourth division of Josephat here is about. It is developing limitless qualities to a mind. And for that, you need to have insatiable Josephat.
And sir kanji and yichi chir yungros that deal them big and susu semlaya and chaban yondroya and chik papebu yonya and samba kibu yonya di mang zoros and kanzamjilaya suzu samba kibu mase and chile migi and sangomina pendo chituya and susu lomba and zambling and ling shen the shin kanjin draw ritrugi and samgomya and pento chetu niba the church drogaza and delaya and choshi chegoya gunzen koreyo maras in the chok mishi zondudi and kitchenbures.
So for example, with the Buddha Dhamma, if Josephat would be increasing more and more, then our understanding will become clearer. We'll have a greater and greater trust in the teachings. And in so doing, our afflictive emotions will abate. We'll have less anger and less attachment. Our mind would be more content, more happy, more relaxed, more spacious. And that would also permeate. It will also influence the people around us, right? So if your mind is made peaceful and quiet and relaxed and happy, the people around you will be influenced by that. Not only that, it can also reach to a greater and greater circles. You can have an influence over the area, the region that you live in, the country, the world, even other world systems, you can say, in a sense that if it causes sentient beings, or sentient beings of the 6 realms of existence, to also develop the mind gradually, there's no reason then to limit your Josephat, to become totally satisfied with your mental development, because you can still develop your mind to acquire better and better qualities. So this is insatiable Josephat.
Any ninji the chanju chamba seki shimju chela pe masibatani 간지 이치 칠실줘야지 뭐도 아니 이치 라줘야지 싸우니 용 말했어 아니 이치 칠줘야지 마스리 아니 semle 편도여 봐 간지 아니 소소 마스 단지 쉬어나지 아니 샹래 편도 쳐도 딘디치기 야지야다 뭐 연구연자 아니 간지 디초래야 아니 촉시 마치지 아니 촉미시 종주를 라고야지 아니 개치 지슈 차리어레스
Think about, for example, the two truths. The more you think of the two truths, the better your clarity is. Also, you become clear about the four truths when you think about them over and over again. The same thing can be said with respect to compassion and loving kindness and bodhicitta. The trust that you have in those topics becomes greater and greater the more you think of compassion, loving kindness, and bodhicitta. So we want to increase them through joyous effort. And this is, you could say, the most important type of joyous effort that we develop here, the one that cannot be satiated with respect to the development of positive qualities.
니버 종주 지들 점비 출라 니 종주 김민춘 초 빵바당 님부 종주 이 떡대고 당부 종주 김민춘 초 빵바는 니 민춘 초 무슨 대지들 빵비 출로스.
How then do you go about the development of joyous effort? In order to develop joyous effort, Shantideva here explains that in two sections. It says that, So in developing joyous effort, it says that we need to do two things. How to undertake joyous perseverance. We need to abandon that which is incongruous with joyous effort, with joyous perseverance. That's the first main point in his explanation. The second is increasing the strength of joyous perseverance, the antidotes, which means that what he does is he says that let's look at joyous effort. There are things that prevent you from developing joyous effort. This is how you deal with them. Then he says, those are the things that are conducive to joyous effort. This is how you develop them.
That kanji mandu chong mo song di so di lelo di des, right? That lelo gi and lelo mu and lelo yewa and duzuta yungu yanza so di she worta mandu chong mo song di he mandu chok she sha lelo ngena shamba di gilu dan nebo slang di and pigi ji lelo and lelo gi yewa and sum di and sikti tonda session nang yores right.
So Shantideva first of all explains what is incompatible with joyous effort. He says that the things that are not compatible with that is laziness. This is what you need to rid yourself of if you want to undertake joyous effort. You need to rid yourself of laziness. So in looking at the first section of that explains how to undertake joyous perseverance, abandoning that which is incongruous with joyous perseverance. First off, Shantideva is identifying the class of things that are incongruous with joyous effort in the last 3 lines of verse 2. So let's look at this verse. It says, its discordant classes should be explained. The laziness. So laziness is a general category. But within that, we have adhering to what is negative and despising oneself out of despondency. So there are different things, different types of attitudes that we might have, which are classified as laziness from a Buddhist perspective. Like, for example, if you have an attitude in which you think that you're incapable of doing things, of accomplishing things, you're looking down on yourself. you're looking down on your own abilities. You have that under appreciation of your own ability to do something. You think that I can't do it, I won't be able to accomplish that, I won't be able to do that, and so forth. From a Buddhist perspective, it is called laziness.
There that dig chochik dodge, penna, tangan penata to search and south church and drondi, and on the summer to yellow sober, but the young cigarettes, and Delia Kazana, I'm a meeting Nijira, and not catching on the Gombalaya, Chama to your Marius. And then like the thing, Tindit Polaya, Destic, and Tirinich and Gulmachin in the Trust on Sera, and then I'm a Chamos to Wayna, and Mamma Wujilaya. I'm going to Tomba Mangujilaya, and it Pantoya chick. Zavigida and Southina, only that Jim give Tomba Soyuna, and it's how you are suddenly and broaching. And Yamnichi, Namshi transadely and broaching Yamnichi. You are a Yinayatang to Zurchan, that the Alakao shoot Chaganza, and on the Mongolia, in Dinamalaya, and Saugon, Sadi Chamogona, Transik, Net Rich. And Makashi in it, and indeed, never do Sra, and the Mambo and the Oyagi, and the Ravachis without Shaggy is the thing.
So, Joseph, Geshe says that, for example, we're heading towards the hot season. Actually, it's already the hot season, isn't it? So, someone asked Geshe before, why is it that we have less teachings or less activities in the hot season? Like, for example, why do we have less teaching in this space during the hot season? Well, it is because there are some people that are reluctant to come here when it's too hot. It's a valid, it's a valid thing, isn't it? Anyway, Geshe says that it is difficult to work in hot conditions. So maybe Geshe says that maybe it could be a beginning of a process by which at some point in the future we will also air condition this space to make it more usable for the summertime. Sorry? Yeah. So maybe we can work towards that, right? Make it a usable space during the summertime. Anyway, looking at the great masters of the past, those great beings, they go to hot places and practice. They train in hot places. They go to cold places and also train in those cold places. This is what the great masters of the past have done. But anyway, also, regardless of that, this is something that we can consider for the future, also air conditioning this space.
Any gallon soda, and it's the Tango check, Shendel longer trees, Tijela, and Mijazolaya, like is.
I guess it says that he himself has this begging bowl of a monk. So he thought that he had that idea of going out with his begging bowl. First of all, calling upon monks and nuns, donations for air condition, then going on runs with the lay community, donations for the air conditioned system. It is possible one day to have an air conditioning in this space. Anyway, with that, let's leave it here for now.
So Elsa was going to get a vote for it, but then she decided it was too difficult, so she didn't. So when Matt's here next time, Matt, the air conditioner got moved from this point.
Yeah, I think that to install air conditions here, we checked it before, or we had a discussion about it before. We have to replace all the windows. We have to make sure that they're sealable. So otherwise, there's no point in installing air conditioning here. So yeah, next time that Matt is here, we can hassle him. All right. Nyududa lama sangye tugene toa chikya malupa de salago pashu. Rinpoche, Marke Pana Kengyuchi, Kevanyam Panle, Gone Kondo Ewa Sho, Kowe Shinkaude, Pendande Wa Manu Joe, Chenre Siwan Tenzing Gatsori, Shape Site Padu Tengyu. Janjin Jango Yawe, Tenzing Kyo Yawe, Gonzo Do Choson Gore Monju Ada Sodu Shekondu Shakti Sho.
Thank you.
Sorry? Whose birthday is it? Konpen. She's 18.